This is part 4 of section 1.6. We are about to start working some matrices with 3 equations and 3 unknowns. So in this case, we still want our 1s on the diagonal, and we're going to get 0s down here and 0s up here. Lower triangle, upper triangle, all 0s. And then your answers are going to be right here. This will be your X column, your Y column, and your Z column. Now, what order do we do this in? First, and then 2 zeros, and usually you can work these 2 in the same step. It's not hard, it's just saving you a recopying step. Okay? So 1 and then usually 2 and 3 in the same step. Then you need a 1 here, and then you need a 0 here, and then you need a 1 here. Okay? This 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is the same as what we have up here in Gaussian Elimination. Okay? And it didn't matter up here what the triangle was. We would do back substitution and get our answer. Okay? But here, we're going to go ahead and get a 1 here, which is something we need, and then we're going to get 0s here. And these 2, just like these 2, can usually be worked in one step. And then you have your last 0 right here. Okay? Now I have that order written on an index card so that we can refer to it as we work other equations, other systems. Okay? So let's start off by writing our augmented matrix. Always double check yourself. Make sure things line up. So I have a 1, 2, 5, -1, -3, 1, 1, 4, -2, and then -4, -15, and +12. So I'm double checking here to make sure I have the correct system written down. Did not make any mistakes. It looks good to me. Okay, so we're going to use our row operations, the same 3 ones we've had before. And we are going to, let's say, we're going to get a 1 right here. That's our first step. And I already have a 1 right there, so I'm going to mark it. Okay. Now the next step, and remember, we can usually work these 2 together and these 2 together. So if I'm going to get, for my second step, I want to get a 0 right here. Okay, second step, I need a 0. We get 0s with a tool row. Where is my tool row? Well, remember, we always have created a 1 in our column, or at least made sure it was there. We just checked this one, so this is going to be my tool row. Okay. Now, what do I need to multiply this by to make this go away? Well, that would be a -2, correct? So I'm going to do -2 times row 2. No, row 1, sorry, row 1. That's my tool row. Plus row 2, and I'm going to write it where row 2 is. Okay? So what is -2 times row 1? Well, that would be -2, +2, -2, and +8. So this is going to be row equivalent to. I'm not going to try to change my first row at all because I already had the 1 there. I'm working on these 2. So I'm not changing this one. I'm going to go ahead and rewrite it. 1, -1, 1, and then a -4 here. Okay, now I took -2 times row 1, I have that written here, and now I need to add it. -2 plus 2 is 0. 2 minus 3 is -1. -2 plus 4 would be 2. And then 8 minus 15 is -7. Okay, now my next step is to get this 0 right here. If I were to do this in a separate step, I would rewrite this here, And then my next step, I would rewrite these two and then replace it. It really is, it's not combining steps so much as it is avoiding rewriting a whole bunch that you don't need to. Okay, so in this same step, I'm going to try to get rid of this 5. We look for our tool row. I've created a 1 somewhere in this column. And unlike having a 2 by 2, it's not always just the other row. I have 2 other rows I have to pick from. But here's the one I created, so this is the one I'm going to use. What do I multiply this by to get rid of a 5? A -5. So -5 times row 1 plus, this time it's row 3, and I'm going to replace row 3. So what do I get when I multiply this by a -5? I get -5, 5, -5, and then -5 times 4 would be 20. Okay, so now I add these together. 5 plus -5 is 0. 1 plus 5 is 6. -2 times -5 would be -7. And then 20 plus 12 would be 32. Okay, so we're in good shape right now. I'm going to recopy it over here. And I'm going to repeat myself. You definitely want to draw the brackets and you want to draw the augmented sign. Okay, you can really get things messed up. Imagine all these numbers that are supposed to be lined up all over the page. The brackets make it so that it's not so confusing. Okay, now what are we going to change this into? What is our goal? Okay, first, the 1 here, we've got it, and then these 2 need to be zeros. All right, so we've done that. Our 4th step is to get a positive 1 right here. And remember, to create 1s, we multiply by the reciprocal. All right, so what is this? This -1 is the one that needs to be changed, and it needs to become a positive 1. So what would I do? I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal, which is -1. -1 times row 2, and I'm going to write that where row 2 is now. My first row is not changing. -1 times 0 is 0. -1 times 1 is 1. -1 times 2 is -2. And -1 times -7 is positive 7. And I'm not changing my 3rd row either. Okay? So, what's next? I have this row, this column is correct, and I have my 1 right here. The next thing I need is 5. In that spot, it needs to be a 0. So I need to change this 6 into a 0. And if you're creating a 0, you're using rule 3, which means that we need a tool row. Well, I'm trying to get rid of this. And so somewhere in this column should be a positive 1 that I created. And I created this one by multiplying by a -1, or at least made sure it was there. So row 2 is my tool row. Okay. So what do I need to multiply this by to add it to this to get rid of it? Well, if I multiply row 2 by a -6, and then add it to row 3, and then I'm going to write it where row 3 is. Not a B, Maggie, a row 3. Okay. So all I'm supposed to be changing is row 3, so I'm going to recopy this with row 1 and row 2 the same. Okay. Now, -6 times row 2 would be 0, -6, 12, and -42. Now let's add these. 0 plus 0 is 0. Notice how nothing that we have already checked and created goes away when we're doing this. That's what I mean by following this order so that you don't undo things. It'd be very easy to do that. 6 plus negative 6 is 0. Okay. Negative 7 plus 12 would be 5. 32 minus 42 would be negative 10. Okay, progress. What's next? All right, so what have we done? We've got this, we've got all those. So our next step is 6, and 6, we need a 1. So step 6 is right here. We need to change that 5 into a 1, and that means we are going to multiply by the reciprocal. The reciprocal of 5 is 1/5. So I'm going to do 1/5 times row 3, and I'm going to write my answer where row 3 is. Okay, so the only thing that's changing is row 3, so I'm going to recopy 1 and 2. Okay, 1/5 times 0 is 0, 1/5 times 0 is 0, 1/5 times 5 is 1, 1/5 times negative 10 would be negative 2. Okay, if we were doing Gaussian elimination, we are in the correct form. Okay, we have our zeros here. This is saying, well, I know what z is. Z is negative 2. And then right here I have something with a y and a z, so I could take this 2 and plug it in and find y, and then take y and z and plug it in and find x. From this step, I can back substitute, but that is not Gauss Jordan elimination. So I'm going to make a little mark here. Okay, and that's the end of Gaussian elimination. Sorry, IAN. Okay, now I'm going to keep going on to Gauss Jordan. Okay. And I'm going to recopy this so I don't get lost. If you're really careful, you don't have to recopy at the end of the line, but it makes it a lot easier for a lot of people to see what's going on. So I'm just going to recopy right now. Okay. We have done more than half of this. We have all that in the right spot. So what's next? We just did 6, now 7 and 8, and we can do these 2 steps together the same way we did these 2 steps together. Okay? Here and here, we're trying to create zeros. Okay? So I need to change this negative 2 to a 0. I'm going to do that one first. Okay? We look for our tool row, and here's where it can get a little bit confusing. I told you to get the 1, and that's going to be your tool row. Well, I have a 1 here and a 1 here. How do I know which one to use? I use the one that I've already verified. I haven't checked or done anything to this one right here. Okay? But this one I created. This one is my tool row. Now, if I used this one, just think about multiplying this by something and adding it to here. That means this 0 is going to go away, which means I'm undoing something I've already done. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I need to get rid of a negative 2, so I'm going to multiply this by a positive 2. 2 times row 3 plus row 2, and I'm going to write that where row 2 is. Now, my bottom row is already exactly what I want, so it's never going to change again. Okay, now if I do 2 times row 3, that's going to be 0, 0, 2, negative 4. Okay, so that will give me 0. I'm replacing row 2, so 0 plus 0 is 0. 1 plus 0 is 1. Negative 2 plus 2 is 0. And then I have 7 minus 4, which is 3. So at this point, I know my z value, I know my y value, I'm working towards getting my x. Okay. Now let's do this one. We can do these in the same step and not recopy. My tool row is the same. I have still created this 1 in that column where I'm trying to get rid of a 0. So if I take this 1, what do I need to multiply this by to get rid of this? Well, a -1. So if I do -1 times row 3, and I'm going to add that to row 1, and then I'm going to replace row 1. -1 times row 3, 0, 0, -1, and +2. So 0 plus 1 is 1. 0 plus -1 is -1. -1 plus 1 is 0. 2 minus 4 would be -2. We are almost done. We have checked just about everything, but we have not done this last step. Okay, this is step 9, and we need a 0 right here. Okay, look for your tool row. Somewhere in this column we have created a 1, and it is row 2. Okay, so what do I need to multiply this by to make this go away? Actually, I don't need to multiply it by anything. But technically, if you want to write down you're multiplying by something, just so it makes sense to you later, you're multiplying by a 1. 1 times row 2 plus row 1, and I'm going to write that where row 1 is. Well, that 1 times row 2 is the same thing, of course. And we're going to have our answer on this step. Rows 2 and 3 are not changing whatsoever. We're done with those. They are in the right form. Okay, now 0 plus 1 is 1. 1 plus -1 is 0. 0 plus 0 is 0. 3 minus 2 is 1. We have our answer right here. Our x is 1, our y is 3, our z is -2. Our answer, 1, 3, -2.